Our test is going to be Tuesday, and that will be May 14th. There will be 13 questions and 80 points. Here are the standards that you will be looking at as you are looking at your standards. The first one is that you need to be able to graph a function. This includes identifying. You're going to have the domain and range that you have to find. You're going to have to tell me exactly where that vertex is. So the vertex being that ordered pair, x, comma, y. Keeping in mind how you're finding that vertex when you find the x coordinate. So sometimes if your equation is in vertex form, remember to, if it's not, it's that negative b over 2a to find the x coordinate, then you substitute in to find the y. You're also going to be asked for the equation for the axis of symmetry. So keeping in mind that that equation always has to be an x equal, and it's x equaling whatever your vertex was. So that first question where you graph, that's going to be 12 points. So make sure as you do the questions on the I-11 and that I-12 in your workbook, page 52 to 55, that you are really making sure you understand the graphing part. The next thing you're going to see is you'll see two questions that says I can create and solve a quadratic function to model real-world problems. That's that vertical motion. There will be 16 points from the two questions. In one of the equations, you will have to write the equation. So you will have to start off and tell me that h equals, it'll be negative 16 t squared. Then it's plus your velocity times t plus the start point of your height c. You will then have to decide if you are trying to find the vertex or if you're trying to set it equal to 0. So it's very much like the problems that we did in I-10. Sometimes you might factor, other times you might have to find how long it's above a certain point. Then you have to subtract the 2 times. So just making sure you're understanding how to do that as you look at it. So 2 questions worth 16 points. The next standard, I can solve a quadratic equation. So there's going to be 6 questions. That's 36 points. When you look at those 6 questions, you can solve them by any means you want. So most of them, like if it's easiest way to solve, it's if you have x squared equals a number, find the square root. If you have an x squared and you can factor it, so when you look at the ax squared plus bx plus c and it's equal to 0, if you can factor, that's going to be the next easiest way. If you can't factor and you can't find the square root, so that's the 2 easiest ways, by finding the square root and factoring. And if you can't do that, then you would definitely want to use your quadratic formula. So you do not want to use the quadratic formula on all 6 because it would just take too long. And you still want to make sure you're understanding what that quadratic formula, if you look at that, to understand if you're going to have no solutions, 2 solutions, or 1 solution. And really, when I was looking at the test, I probably would maybe use the quadratic on 1, and I'd be using the factoring and looking for greatest common factors on, and doing square roots on the other ones. The last part of the test that I'm going to be asking you to do with the last 4 questions is to interpret the key features of a quadratic function. That means we're going to compare the width. We're going to determine maximum or minimum. We're going to find the vertex of it. We're going to explain what the discriminant means. So going back to the notes, where when do you know you're going to have 2 solutions, 1 solution, or no solution? Make sure you're understanding that and that you can explain it. And then the 3 forms of the equation. So you might have to rewrite something in a different form. I might give you it in standard form and ask you to change it to one of the other ones. So kind of like that project, and just making sure you understand which way it's written. So the test is Tuesday. This is kind of what's going to be on those last 4 questions. That will be 16 points for a total of our 80 that we are looking at. And the project that you are working on, everyone will do this page. You have to fill in as much information. It says for each of the equations, write down 3 features. So you don't have to do all of them. You just have to do 3 from each one. And then the other 2 boxes are going to be left blank. So if you're looking at this one, can you tell the vertex easily, the roots, the y-intercept? So maybe there's only going to be these last two with one of these, right? So hopefully you can determine the last two pretty easily for all of them, and then you're going to be trying to look at the form of the equation to tell us the other thing. Again, remember, you are only going to do 3 of those key features is what I'm looking for. The next question says to look at the equation and to write down observations that are the same and different about the graphs. So you're going to look at these two, and you're just going to write your observations, like what do we know about direction, vertex, and width about these two graphs. Okay. Get to question 3, and it says next we are going to look at the cards, and these are the cards that have to be done in class. They're going to be like dominoes. So you can have domino E card is given here. It says there are 3 equivalent equations, and the graph does not match these equations. So just keep in mind that this is going to match the graph of a different card. This graph is going to match the equations for a different card. So it says you will need to find another domino card that has a graph that matches the equation E. Lay it next to that domino. You will find another domino that matches the graph of E, and it has the right direction of the domino. When you are done, you should have one loop. The domino is forming a circle on your desk. Each domino must match one sitting next to it in either direction. When your loop is done correctly, your teacher will check it, and I guess the key thing here is that I'm probably not going to be checking yours, is just making sure that you write down your loop. So we will be talking about that in class. So I will probably just check off that you have a loop, but I am not going to check the order of it. That's when I will be correcting that. So on your project, this is going to be at least 10 points that I will be taking a look at for you to tell me that you had the correct order. On the back of this sheet, as you take a look, this will be your other homework that you're going to be looking at. So on the back of this, here you are given 4 equations, it sketches the graphs. So you have these 4 equations, and then you have your 4 graphs, and it says match the equation to the graph and explain your decision. So you might say that A matches with because of key features. So you notice the point P, you notice here this one has point Q, you have this one at point R, and you have this one at S. So if you're looking at these 3 equations, you might notice, what do I know about this? So you're going to try and decide which one it matches. I'm not going to help you. It's a quiz. You can work with your partner. And then you have to give your reason why. So once you give your reason why, and you are taking a look at that, the next thing you are going to do is you're going to tell me where point P is located. How do you get this? Is you should be using your equations that were up here, looking at like key features. Oh, this one is written in factor form, so it tells us solutions. This one is vertex forms, so it tells us a vertex. Here again we have factored form, and we also know about direction in all of them. So hopefully you can pick out those 4 points. And then in question 5, as you are taking a look at question 5 then asks you, the graph of the quadratic has a y-intercept of 0, 5. It has a minimum of 3, -4. Write the equation. So keeping in mind what you know about it, and I will take it in whichever form you'd like to write it. And then B says, write coordinates or roots of that quadratic function. So when you are looking at the quadratic equation that you had up here, I now need to know what are your 2 roots as you are looking at that. So the domino cards, some of them are going to have missing pieces, others do not. As you notice that E didn't have any missing. And we'll talk about what you know about equation, or as you look at card E, what this is telling us. So the first one really helps us with the y-intercept if it's in standard form. This one is telling us our roots or our solution, and the last one is telling us our vertex. So that kind of should help you. Also, you look at the first thing, and we notice all of these parabolas that have to match to give me all this information. This one couldn't even match this one if we wanted to, because this parabola goes up, and this parabola has to go down because of the negative in front. So you'll match the cards. And then homework is working the next 2 days on the review, and then the textbook review also on Friday, and test is scheduled for Tuesday.